Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're in studio with Jason to talk about range safety. But before we get started, we'd like to invite you to come by and check out Second Legacy. It's a brand new channel that we've set up, and I'm working with Braden from Langley Outdoor Academy. And we're talking about politics and recent events in a format that's not been done before on GunTube. So please check the link down below in the video description. With that being said, let's talk about range safety. This is all centered around something that recently happened to us.
Yeah, on the Mac range. It was quite interesting.
Yeah, we were out doing a little bit of shooting. And we were just shooting some wolf 7.62x54R, and we were getting ready to film, or we were doing some testing with the intent to film. And yeah, we were doing a little bit of shooting, and we were prepping everything in the shooting shack. And you looked down range and said, "There's a fire."
Yep.
And the range was on fire.
Yes, it was. So, wolf has a bimetal, bullet, if you will. And so it wasn't like a steel core, but there's like the coating, if you will, is a bimetal coating on there. So honestly, couldn't tell you or see this ever happen, because we fired so much wolf out there. Not only, because 7.62x39 has bimetal, and 5.45 and all these other cartridges out there that have bimetal rounds. And
yep. Wolf 223 is bimetal. Yeah.
Right. And so for whatever reason, and none of us had any tracers out there, it was all full metal jacket, but for whatever reason, something out there hit a rock, a plate, a something in some way to cause a spark or an intense heat to spark up the grass that was around the target. And mind you, we've been getting dumped on with rain and snow and all that.
Rain the day before.
The ground is soaked, but any grass or leaves sitting above it is like bone dry, because it's all dead. It's been dead for the winter and fall, and so there is not one lick of moisture inside of it because the new grass hasn't popped up yet. And so sure enough, we were talking. What's odd was the wind was blowing the complete opposite direction, and I was like, I smell smoke, which was the weird thing, because how could I? It was going the wrong way, and it was 200 yards away.
Right.
And so I looked down range, and sure enough, there's a fire. And I was like, a little cuss word in there, like, wow, we got a fire, Tim. We got to. So grabbed all of our fire stuff, which we do. We keep fire stuff in the shack, which was big enough for the shack. But once I got down there,
not big enough for a forest fire.
Like 10 feet of the prairie, And so I was like, well, that didn't do it. So we went to get buckets, and you've got this agricultural ditch that runs through there. But to get down to it is like a 20-foot vertical wall.
Yep.
That you have to climb down to get to this. And so we tried.
I was wearing myself out carrying buckets of water
up there. But by the time you dump the bucket in the area, it's just spreading.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the wind was kicking up and all that stuff. And ultimately, we got to call the fire department. They've got trucks for this. They've got more water than we can get onto this, because it had already gotten too far.
We want to thank our friends at the local
volunteer fire department. Volunteer fire department. So important. I can't stress this enough. Most of these folks are like, you don't need your volunteer or whatever it is. These are the guys that literally will leave their work, wake up in the middle of the night from their wife and kids, whatever it is, and they will get up and go drive their vehicle. You wouldn't believe how many people are like, oh, that's just a blue light. I'm not going to let him pass me or get around me. He doesn't have the, cherries and berries, if you will. It's like, just move off to the side, because one day that guy or gal might be coming to save your life. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so they get there, they get their trucks, and they come to our aid, which was just awesome, because while there was no life or structure that was in danger, because it was in the middle of that prairie.
Had it gone out of control,
exactly,
structures would have been dangerous.
Exactly, because all that grass, that's a large field. Yep. Like eventually it's going to make it somewhere, because it wasn't going to stop.
No.
And so, luckily those guys came out there with their cool little brush truck, which just sprayed water out the front, out the back, everywhere, and helped us get the fire out. And so it was awesome. And they instantly knew, like, oh man, you're shooting out here. And it's like,
we watch your videos. So we want to thank you guys. You guys were awesome. And hopefully you guys had a good lunch.
Yeah.
But so that was pretty interesting. So we, as you said, we keep safety gear in the shooting shack. We keep medical kits, we keep fire extinguishers, we keep buckets, we keep the stuff. But
boo-boo kits.
Boo-boo kits.
Yep.
We're primarily worried about the structure of the shack itself, right? Because we have gunpowder, firearms, all sorts of combustibles in there. We keep gasoline in there for the generator to run, power and stuff like that in the summer months. And so we were thinking about the shack. I wasn't thinking, because I've never in my entire life have I set a range on fire.
Yep.
Right. And we know not enough not to shoot tracer ammo. Right. I have tracer ammo, but it's kept completely separate in a different ammo can. I never bring the stuff out.
It's labeled and sticks out like a sore thumb.
I don't even put it in magazines. I just keep it just in case.
Yep.
That's my shiznit hits the fan reserves. Right. So just in regular shooting, I don't have any desire to find out what a tracer can or cannot do. I already know. I've shot thousands of them in my life. So wasn't a tracer. But this goes back to range safety at indoor ranges. How many times have you heard people say, you can't shoot bimetal bullets in an indoor range because it'll damage the traps? No, it won't. Modern traps, we've shot on ranges that can actually handle 50 BMG from 25 yards, right? So modern traps can stop bimetal bullets. They're not armor piercing. A bimetal bullet is just a bullet with a lead core that has a mild steel jacket instead of copper. It's a soft metal. It's not as soft as copper, but it's soft. It's not steel like you'd make a knife blade out of, right? So it's not a penetrator, but it does spark. And indoor ranges have what Iraq veteran calls range trash laying on the floor. And what is that? Unburnt powder. Every time you fire a cartridge, unburnt powder goes out the end of that barrel. And then it coats the floor. So if you go to any indoor range, put a glove on if you're going to do this, and run it across the floor and pick it up, that gray dust you're looking at is unburnt powder. Right. And what happens when you introduce a spark to that? Instant combustion, right? If you've ever, and I don't recommend doing this because it's very easy to hurt yourself, but if you put gunpowder in a line and then take a torch, don't put a match right up next to it. Just don't do it at all. But it burns. You'll see how quickly it burns.
Very fast.
Right? And so that's what an entire range would do if a bimetal bullet was to hit a steel plate and cause a spark. But I wasn't thinking about that. There's rocks all across that berm out there at 200 yards that are hidden underneath the grass. We like to think it's just dirt out there, but it's dredged by the county fairly often. They pull up rocks and just deposit it on the shore right there by where our range is. And so I think it was one of the bimetal bullets hit a rock and it sparked because the rock was under the grass, perfect conditions. The spark turned into a flame underneath that grass and then And so it can happen at indoor ranges. It can happen at outdoor ranges. You have to be very careful with anything that's bimetal. Have to be careful with anything that's a tracer. And you still have to be careful even with lead bullets and copper jackets. Not that they can cause a fire per se, but they're still potentially dangerous with ricochets and things like that. But that's why they'll put a magnet on your round when you go to an indoor range, right? And once that starts in an indoor range, there's not a whole lot you can do. The people inside are in trouble. It's going to burn bright and fast. And then if it's a concrete indoor range, hopefully that would be the end of it. But the people inside are in jeopardy. So, range safety consists of so many different things. And as with any type of an emergency, you're not always prepared. You're not expecting it. We certainly weren't expecting to look down range and see a fire raging across the prairie.
I mean, for the years we've been shooting out there, we have never had that happen. And so it's one of those things like, wow, I honestly, now it makes me think, all right, we need to have provisions to put out a range fire. You know what I mean? If that ever happens again, like either a tank on the back of the player or something, we need something bigger. We need something that we can either throw into that creek that's electric or something like an electric pump or something you chuck in there to get something with more water, more something. So, something to think about. I mean, range rules exist for a reason. We always talk about why there's signs on certain things. You're like, why would you put that sign there? It's because somebody did it.
Don't stick your head from a moving train. Why would you put that sign there? Who would do that? Somebody did. That's why the sign's there.
Somebody put their head out there and got their head ripped off, from a train. And so they do it all the time. And so there's a lot of folks, why don't they allow, rapid fire or double taps or drawing from a holster? Most range, like public ranges and things like that, the reason they have those rules is because in order for them to have a range, they have to have insurance. They have to have some kind of insurance, and that insurance wants them to have these rules, if you will, because of public safety. You don't know who's coming to that range and what their skill level is, right? You get this guy that wants to draw from a holster who's never really done it before, and he sees on the video just go fast and hard, if you will, and he'll end up touching one off before it's actually on target, and somebody could get injured from that. Or, rapid fire or things like that. Some people don't realize that the gun is recoiling up and now they're taking stuff out into the ceiling or the floor.
Or
you go to an
over
indoor range and you just laugh. And it's like, why is there all the floor ripped up and the ceiling ripped up and all that? And
I've seen impact marks literally like right next to where I'm standing. Like people have discharged weapons, like just.
Exactly.
It's one of the reasons I don't like to shoot at indoor ranges.
And over the berm, that's also another thing, like if you put targets, like you've got one of those berms that's like far out, but you've got targets set at different distances, what that's going to do when you miss is potentially skip and go over the berm, or, those that are firing fast end up over the berm, and now you're sending rounds that are completely uncontrolled because there's a lawyer with every bullet. Every bullet you fire, there's a lawyer attached to that. Because now you're in no control of that bullet anymore. It's going where it's going, and hopefully nobody's in its way.
If you want to see an example of what we're talking about, go watch any Knob Creek video from the past.
Yeah.
And watch those machine gun demonstrations. And you can see when they do the night fire, when they're firing the tracers, and you can trace the path of a bullet, you can see what those bullets are doing. Absolutely crazy aerobatics. Those bullets are going everywhere.
Go to a military range and watch.
Well, I was going to say, military range, but most people aren't going to listen to the military just to go see.
Right.
And you can't just walk up to a military range and watch what's going on. But you can look at the videos. I mean, look at videos from firefights, look at videos from Knob Creek. Knob Creek's a great example because there's just a high volume of rounds being fired on a range, and you can see the tracer. And keep in mind, the tracer's every third or fourth round. So it's all the rounds in between are doing the exact same thing.
Right.
And they're just going everywhere. And so those tracers can be a fire hazard, but those bullets are going everywhere too. And that's something that you need to be aware of. And that all goes back into the whole range safety thing. When you're setting your range up, make sure that you have berms that are appropriately tall enough so you're not putting your neighbors at risk, because those bullets can travel great distance.
Like a good face to them, not like a ramp essentially, but a good face to them. And then also, tall enough that they can stop or prevent if somebody did get a little high, that you can stop it and they can realize it, type of thing.
Yep. And use common sense. Like we don't shoot 50 BMG at the MAC range.
No.
Because we know that a couple miles behind us, there's a highway.
Yep.
And that big old pill can make it there.
Yes. 50 BMG is no joke.
No. And so, but you have people buying them all the time. They're just going out shooting them into the woods.
Oh, that's
I'm not saying it should be banned or anything like that. What I'm saying is use common sense. Right. Understand that bullet will carry. It's designed to carry. It's designed to deliver a lot of energy on target. It's designed to be lethal, extreme ranges.
Right.
And so you just have to be very careful. Now, if we were to ever fire 50 BMG at the range, we'd be very close to the berm to make sure that we could trap that bullet. But that would just be a test fire.
Right.
Because we wouldn't sit at 200 yards and shoot for groups because we don't want to lose control of that bullet. I have no idea where it's going. And I don't want to find out the hard way.
660 or 700 grain plus. And going, 20 some hundred feet per second. It's nothing to slouch at.
So we have energy. Our own protocols at both of our ranges, right? We zero at close range, we confirm zero, and then we move to the longer distances.
Yep.
And we use ballistic calculators. So we always put that bullet into the berm, right?
Yep.
And it's just using common sense.
The other thing I tell people to look out for, especially if you buy a new gun, the first time you chamber it facing a berm or down. You know what I mean? You wouldn't believe how many people lock a magazine in there and hit their release, or exactly, a slam fire. There are guns out there that have this problem. Some AKs, if you put a heavy recoil spring in a 5.56 AK, it can have enough inertia that especially if it's not a spring-loaded firing pin, that firing pin, just the inertia of closing, will slam that primer and set that round off.
Yep.
And that's where you come into sometimes getting double, triple, or 5 rounds fired at once, because you get what's a slam fire situation going on. And so we've seen that. We've actually had
I've seen it with them
prototype firearm in our possession that happened to both me and you. And luckily we were chambering it facing the ground, and boom, just a slam fire happened. And it was like, holy cow, look out for that. That's
right.
So something, know your gun and what its capabilities are. And so always, I try to chamber rounds, especially a new firearm, to see what things are going to do.
If you're looking at military surplus firearms like the M1 Garand, you have to keep in mind that those guns were designed to use specific types of ammunition, right? Hard primers.
Right.
Take a look at the video we did with True Velocity just recently, right? Where we were getting like primer strikes. In all likelihood, it was because it was a hard military primer. They should have used commercial primers in that ammo if they're going to sell it to the commercial market. Chances are it's just a hard primer. But commercial primers are softer. So if you take commercial 30-06 and run it in M1 Garand that doesn't have a spring on the firing pin, there are certain things that can make it unsafe. As it starts to near the end of that end block clip, it'll have less pressure on the bolt, and that bolt can have higher velocity, which can cause a slam fire with commercial ammunition. Don't ever take an M1 Garand, leave the clip out of it, put it around in the chamber, and let the bolt go, because now you're setting the gun up for a failure, especially with commercial ammo. So you just have to use common sense, read and learn about the firearm that you're using, and take appropriate action, right? But there's a lot of things you just have to learn the hard way.
Right.
Like when I was growing up, I didn't have somebody to teach me proper firearms instruction. I just learned on my own. I'd read magazines and I'd go out with my friends and shoot. I learned about slam fires. I learned about all this stuff about range safety the hard way. Thankfully, nobody got injured. Right. The best way is to get instruction. And there's a lot of schools out there right now that'll teach you basic firearm safety and teach you the principles of, safe handling of a firearm, and talk about those instances where, guns can slam fire, and always load a weapon when it's pointed in a safe direction and stuff like that.
Finger off the trigger.
Finger off the trigger, all that good stuff.
We know we got the basic safety rules, right? Keep your finger off the trigger. Don't point the gun at anything you don't intend to destroy. Always keep blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? All that good stuff. I actually went through in my course where I learned a lot of that was a hunter's education course where we were taking a firearm, if you will, and how to cross a fence with a firearm safely, how to do all this stuff. And that was actually very helpful at my young age of how to manipulate with a firearm, because I still use a lot of that today. And so then the military, things like that will help as well for safety and all that stuff, because there's a lot of safety stuff. You do something bad in the military, you're going to get shredded for it. And then you'll remember. You know what I mean?
Funny how that works. Bends and thrusts can do a proper adjustment to your behavior and attitude.
Also, how your firearm acts. This is another one. Squibs, or hang fires, or things of that. Like, so a hang fire would be you click, no bang. You don't just immediately go jacking that round out of there.
Go back and watch the True Velocity video where we were shooting the ammunition out of the bolt gun. And I fired it. It was a click, no bang. What do? I sit and wait. Matter of fact, I had to cut the video because I waited so long on the first one until I realized it was a soft primer strike.
Right.
Because I had no idea what just happened. Because you can have primers that are slow to ignite. And if you go click and jack that round out, boom, it can go off right there on the bench. Now, it's not going to have the barrel there to get the bullet up to velocity, but I know somebody that had a 308 cartridge foolishly kept on the stove at their apartment. And that 308 cartridge fell into the burner. They didn't notice it, and the cartridge went off, and the brass case went into their arm.
Yeah.
And wound up causing quite a bit of damage.
Right.
So, throwing live rounds into campfires isn't funny because that can end badly.
Same thing. You have no control.
Right.
Now it's completely out of control. Squibs, know how the firearm feels. Like if a recoil impulse felt different,
stop.
Take the time to stop, pull it apart, clear the weapon, clear everything out of it, make sure it's, empty, and pull it apart and check the barrel. Yep. Because you wouldn't believe how many times I think it was a High Point or something. It was laughable. They cut a barrel open and there was some
6 rounds in there,
squibs or something, one behind the other. It's like, at what point did you realize you weren't hitting the target? You weren't seeing any splash.
The gun wasn't cycling.
Something goes, you know what I mean? At what point was that going to click in your head? You know what I mean? There's a customer that comes in here that I think has blown up multiple silencers because they're putting them on wrong calibers.
Mm-hmm. Very real problem. 1/2x20 used by 9mm and 5.56, for example, in the United States. And so it's very easy to put a 223 suppressor on a 9mm firearm.
Mm-hmm. And so that's exactly kind of what happened. You know what I mean? And so a lot of times know what it is that you own.
Be careful. Just don't get in a hurry. Just stop, take a moment and look at what you're doing and make sure what you're doing is sound. Because same thing, 300 blackout and 5.56.
We see this a lot. Now the subsonic sometimes won't chamber, but I know the supersonic
will, because the ogive is going to allow it to get into the chamber and push that bullet back. And now you have a grenade on your hands.
Yep. And that's where a lot of people blow up their guns.
Yep.
As they mistakenly get a 300 blackout mixed in there.
If anything goes wrong, I can't stress this enough. It doesn't sound right. The recoil feels off. Anything goes wrong, just stop. Mm-hmm. And if you experience a malfunction, it's not a race, right? Stop and make sure that when you're firing the weapon and the gun goes down for whatever reason, just stop, play it safe, just check the bore, because you just never know. Because especially when an AR-15 grenades, we've done it purposely, right? We've put cleaning rods in barrels to show people what to expect should a gun grenade.
It literally
splits that receiver right by your face, right? And so you have to be careful. Now, some guns, like the Tavor, are designed to take over pressures and not fail in a catastrophic way and damage the shooter's face, right? Or harm the shooter. They are designed so the mechanism will seize, and even with an overpressure round or an obstruction in the barrel, it'll seize. It destroys the gun, but it doesn't hurt the shooter. Yep. And people always say, well, that makes me nervous shooting that bullpup next to your face. Like, I'd rather shoot this T7 or X95 or Tavor next to my face than an AR-15, because I know that this thing is designed to take an overpressure where the AR-15 will just explode. Yep. So, it's just, all it boils down to is just being cautious. Yep. And if something doesn't sound right or seem right, just take a moment to investigate. Now, if you're in a gunfight, things change, right? You're just going to have to take that risk. But on the range, where 99.999% of us are going to live and shoot and never have to use a weapon in self-defense, just be a little cautious.
All right. Amplified a little bit more as well on being cautious when you're by yourself shooting.
Yeah,
because
you'll be there to help.
Can happen. Have a tourniquet, with you and things like that. Medical, important. And also, you have no backup. It's just yourself. So come up with a game plan in your head. If I know I'm going to do my best to prevent it, but if this were to happen, this is what I need to do, or have that plan in place so that way you can get help and get out. Because I know some people do things in remote areas, up in the mountains. We've been in Utah where they got a lot of BLM land and things like that. Where
no cell service.
Right. There was no cell service out there.
Without a sat phone, you're in trouble.
So you got to basically take care of your bleed, if you will, and get yourself back to a vehicle or whatever it is to get out of there and get yourself taken care of.
It wasn't life-threatening, but you remember when I chopped the end of my finger off?
Yeah.
Out at Eric's?
Yeah.
And we had to drive for like 45 minutes to get to a hospital. Mm-hmm. And that hospital wouldn't treat me. They're like, no, we're not equipped to sew that back on.
Yep. So
you have to go somewhere else. And to drive another half hour to another hospital and then sit in the lobby.
Yep.
So you just never know. Again, that wasn't life-threatening, but that just tells you that with a serious injury, take Kentucky ballistics.
Yeah.
That happened to him out at his range, and then he had to drive himself to a hospital, stopping the bleed.
He was holding his thumb in his neck.
Yep.
And then his dad helped him, or I believe, because that's who films for him, and helped get him in the truck and get going. And without his dad there and him holding pressure on his own neck, like he very well could not be with us today.
Yep. Thank God things played out the way they did.
Right.
So again, it just boils down to common sense, being safe. And if you're unsure about something, investigate, right? Mm-hmm. If you're not familiar with your weapon, get familiar with it. Right. If you're shooting an M1 Garand, know that it can slam fire. SKSs, I've had them slam fire with commercial ammunition.
Yep.
Right? So anything that doesn't have a firing pin spring or doesn't have a safety like the MCX, that doesn't have something, because a lot of military rifles don't. They're just assumed that they're going to use hard primers. Mm-hmm. And so they're sold on the surplus market, and there's commercial ammunition with the soft primers.
A little bit quicker with this. That's what the SKS is notorious for. That was a slam fire.
Excellent work, Will. Excellent work.
Buzzle.
You almost shot the car.
Almost.
Right. So you just have to get familiar with the weapon, understand it, and then just an abundance of caution and just be careful.
Right. So fire prevention, medical, all this other stuff, learn obviously from any mistakes, learn from other people's mistakes. All that other good stuff is all I can basically
read
say.
As much as you can about your weapon of choice, mm-hmm. right? If you carry a Glock, learn about it.
Yeah.
There's certain things that Glocks don't like. They don't like bullet setback because they have unsupported cases in the chamber.
Right.
Right. So be aware of that. And it's just, again, whatever weapon that you're using, learn as much as you possibly can about it. Right. Don't just buy it and start shooting it and never take the time to learn about it. Get involved, right? It's just like when you buy a new car or anything else, you want to learn the systems of the vehicle.
Right.
So you can use it and all the safety features that it has to its max potential. Nothing's different with a firearm.
There's one forum or group that I follow on. It's just like an email blog. I want to say OSD, Open Source Defense. Mm-hmm. They do a lot of little articles and things. And they did an article just recently that I read this morning about, they called it like, I know a guy or something like that. And they were talking about how the fact like they went to an event and they got like somebody offered to do private things with them before the event. And then at the event, they did their thing. And then after the event, they got, because they know some guy, if you will, and got to do all this private stuff with machine guns. And they're talking, wow, that was really cool. What they were also talking about is newbies and how to, don't just take shooting, if you will, and just be by yourself. Like I went and introduced myself to all my neighbors on my street, and they know that I shoot. And I told them, I was like, hey, if it gets obnoxious or whatever, let me know, and I'll stop if you're having a family party or whatever it is.
I did the same thing.
I want to try to be kind and courteous while doing it. I'm not going to be like, don't tell me what to do.
Right.
Obviously, there's within reason, right? If you don't just want me
you
to,
may have that neighbor.
Right.
Yeah.
You might, and I'm not saying they don't exist, but he's also a shooter. He's got nowhere to go. And I was like, well, maybe occasionally you can stop by and, we can shoot. Basically, I'm opening up shooting for these people that are just new to the fold, or they may leave the fold because they don't have anywhere to go or anybody to talk to or learn from or hang out with. He may never learn certain safety things because when he comes to shoot with me on my range, he may do certain things. I'm like, whoa, hold on, let me show you the right way.
Can we do this way?
Yeah. Exactly. Because
politely correct.
Exactly. And so then they learn from that. And so I think it's important to, teach others, because I see some people do some crazy stuff and hey, hold on a second, check this out. Maybe do
this
it
is how I do it. Yeah.
Right. And so they learn from that, and maybe they'll pass that on to the next guy, and we bring more people into the shooting community. I know the shooting community can be quite interesting at times in terms of,
well, there's two different communities
between piston and DI and this caliber versus this caliber.
There's two different gun communities.
Gun and this gun.
There's the online gun community, which isn't a community at all.
Right.
It's just mostly people trolling each other.
Right.
And then you have the actual gun community, like in person, at the range, at the gun store.
Right.
So two different groups of people. Now, there's a lot of cross-pollination. They'll be perfectly friendly to you at the gun store and be your best friend, but the minute they get home and get online, they're going to trash talk you.
Yep.
So we separate those two. Got the online gun community. It's its own creature. The actual shooting public, I've never met more friendly, helpful, decent human beings in my entire life. I couldn't be more proud of the community I belong to, because these are people that will literally give you the shirt off their back.
Right.
These are people that don't care about religion, race, creed, sexual identity. They just don't care. It's not even part of the discussion. It's just, do you shoot or not?
Yeah, do you shoot? Let's go have some fun or whatever.
All that matters, it's not what you shoot. It's just that you shoot, and we have this common bond now, and we can be friends. And that's the beautiful thing about the gun community. And I've seen it in the motorcycle community. I've seen it in the car community, right? You have the online car people that just, trash each other. But when you go to the actual cruise night, everybody's getting along. Right.
Nice car. Love
right.
the car.
How'd you do that? Again, it's not just the gun community. It's just the internet's typically toxic. People aren't as toxic in person because they don't want their lights punched out.
Right.
Their worst behavior comes out when they go home and get online.
Well, what I'm saying to that is I'm able to spread safety knowledge to this guy, who then can spread it to that guy. Or I'm able to learn safety things or preparations from that guy because he's been doing it longer than I have.
I've learned so much that way.
That I have contacted on, I think it's Prescott Shooting Club, Ryan, I believe he's the owner of that. And he does a lot of prepping stuff. You wouldn't believe how many times I'll text and call him like, hey man, does this work? Or, hey, is there a solution for this? Or, hey, you know what I mean? Like, I've always reached out to him for prepper type stuff. You know what I mean? And again, there's safety that goes along with that as well. So, again, range rules for a reason, preparation for a reason, know your stuff for a reason. It's everything.
Yep.
I would have never thought we'd have a range fire like we did. Never.
No, it's unexpected, but that's the nature of an accident.
Yep.
Right? It's not expected. It takes you by surprise.
Yep.
So the question is, how do you respond?
Yep.
Unfortunately, we got it under control very quickly, but we could be better prepared than we are now.
Yep.
So immediately we called off filming for the day, and we immediately went out and bought more equipment.
More equipment to fight a range fire should it ever happen again.
Because now that's a possibility that we recognize. That we thought we were being careful of, not using certain types of ammunition, but not even thinking about bimetal and rocks. So anyway, hope you guys found today's video interesting and informative. We'd like to invite you to swing by and check us out over on Patreon, become part of our Patreon family, help support us here at the Military Arms Channel. Also right here on YouTube, you got the little thanks button and a little join button on the other side of the video player. And you can support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Do swing by, check out Second Legacy. Again, link down below. And also please swing by and check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 15 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care, guys.